Welcome to another episode of Systematic Geekology. This is a space where we seek to create and cultivate healthy conversations between those things we geek out on and the philosophical and theological questions that often arise out of our fandoms. Like, what does it mean to be human? What makes a hero? What makes a villain? How do the stories and narratives we geek out on shape how we live in the world? We are your priest to the geeks. We aren't all ordained, but we see ourselves as mediators at the intersection of geek culture and going deeper in our faith. We don't always have to agree, but we do respect each other, and we see everyone as a beloved child of God. Everyone geeks out on something, so come geek out with us and enjoy the show.
You're listening to an Anazao Ministries podcast.
Cartoons, animation, new food. Oh my, it is a good time to be a geek. And today is a giant size episode of What's News. There's so much in the culture that pops in pop culture. And today we're going to talk about four topics, four IPs and properties and geek things that I know I love all of them. And so we're going to talk about Bad Batch. We're going to talk about X-Men 97. We're going to talk about Invincible and how that wrapped up. And then we're going to talk about these new episodes of Doctor Who that dropped on Disney Plus. There's a new Who, there's a new Doctor, and we're ready to geek out. And I can't do this alone. So I am going to bring in some of my favorite geeks, some of my favorite nerds to geek out with. And as they come on this episode, guess what? They're going to share just off the top of their head and heart their favorite geek child, or like, what is their favorite property out of these four? If they had to choose one, which one would it be? So first up, I'm going to bring in Justin. Justin, all right. Out of those four things that we're going to talk about today, Bad Batch, X-Men 97, Invincible, and Who? Which one is your favorite, buddy? Which one are you going to?
This is a really hard question for me, but I'm going with X-Men.
Oh man, isn't your avatar like a Doctor Who character? Am I wrong?
You're correct. That's why this was really, really hard for me. But I'll tell you more why later.
Oh, can't wait. That's not a teaser, folks. I don't know what is. All right, bring in Kevin. One of my favorite people named Kevin is here on the show, and he's going to share with us, out of those four properties, Kevin, which one are you choosing?
Well, it's easy. Also X-Men, because that's the only one I'm caught up on here. So I'm mainly going to be talking on. But not just that. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm super behind on Bad Batch, unfortunately. So I will leave you guys to discuss that. And then there's no diss to Doctor Who at all. I've not had the time to ever become a Whovian yet. So I am not an authority on there by any means. But X-Men, I'm ready to discuss.
Cool. And that's why we have so many hosts and we have so many fandoms. We can't I know I can't consume and be a geekologist on all fandoms at all times and all things. So we bring other hosts, other friends to come and educate us, to geek out with us and lure us into those worlds. And so it's been a long time since I've been a Whovian, and I think I'm hooked. I think I'm being drawn in with this new one. So, all right. And next up, your favorite your favorite person named Christian is here, and he's going to share with us, out of those four properties, which one is your favorite, if you had to choose one?
I'm with Justin. It's like, how do I choose my favorite child through all this? But I will agree with the group. It is X-Men 97. I became a little kid again watching that show when I was just a wee little lad back in the day, again, watching X-Men 97.
I love that. Yes, and I'll reveal mine. Mine. I'm 4 for 4. We're gonna do X-Men 97. One of my first fandoms I fell in love with, of course, was Star Wars. But the next up were X-Men comics from Claremont and Byrne off the spinner rack on the way to school, spending my lunch money on comic books and candy bars on the way to school. And so I cut my teeth on those superhero books, and I've been an X-Men fan ever since. And it has its highs, it has its lows being an X-Men fan. with this property and things. But of course, the animated series from back in the 90s was so good. And then they really, the nostalgia bait drew me in, but they did not disappoint in the storytelling. So that is what is going to be my favorite, my choice of all these four. But first, to discuss these things, let's see. We're going to start with Bad Batch. And Kevin, I know you said that
you can spoil. It's okay. Don't worry.
There's some things. I think the ride and the journey is super fun. Yeah. So even if we spoil some things and give you some things at this finale of where this lands after its third season and where it can go from there, I still think, down the road, you'll forget what we said anyway. And
it's all good.
And there is somebody that told me, I forgot where I heard it. They said even that sometimes spoilers help you with your fandom because it settles in and it takes away your angst. Since you know what's going to happen, you enjoy the ride leading up to it. So you're not like, I know I kind of sit with anxiety sometimes with these movies, but I don't know what's going to happen, how they're going to handle these people. And when they do, Anyway, so spoilers, whatever. Across the board, folks, if you haven't seen any of these series, there are spoilers. Go watch or just listen to us and then enjoy on your own. Let's dive into Bad Batch. And I think as we talk about Bad Batch, I think we're deserving of another sound effect. Yeah, there you go. It was a short one, but there it is. Bad Batch. So yes, Star Wars has many on-ramps and off-ramps. If you're a Star Wars fan, you have the original trilogy, you have the prequel trilogy, you have the Disney property and trilogy, and then you have the animated series, you have the books, you have the Clone Wars, which help people deal with and make the prequel trilogy more palatable to their palate and grow and expand that universe. And so now Disney has embraced kind of the animated shows, and Bad Batch was, if I'm wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, y'all, is the Bad Batch kind of their first, I guess they did like another season of Clone Wars, right?
Yes.
Kind of finished they did another season of Clone Wars. They did Visions. They did Tales of the Jedi. Bad Batch was another property that comes from the Clone Wars, but Disney kind of took it over. Filoni said, yep, let's run with these characters that I helped create. And it's been 3 seasons. It started out with kind of Order 66 and how this Bad Batch of clone troopers dealt with Order 66 and kind of breaking away from the clones and doing things on their own and being rebels, almost like a band of mutants that are out there in the world doing their own thing, trying to win the hearts of those around them, but understanding to be lone rangers or to be alone and kind of camp out on their own isn't necessarily the right thing when there are wrong things and bad things happen in the universe. And they've gone through 3 seasons. We have Omega, which is a girl version of Boba Fett, I guess you could say, unaltered clone who I personally have fell in love with over the course of these 3 seasons. Loved her to death, and then at the end of the season 3, final season, and then I thought, I'll be right up front, I thought it stuck the landing. I was kind of nervous how are they going to handle that last episode, but it was a double episode of like 40 some minutes, and so it wasn't just like one of these shorter 20-minute episodes. And then they stuck the landing of what they could do with her later on. Justin, you're caught up on this. What are your thoughts on Bad Batch as a whole, and then how this 3rd season went?
Okay, I'm going to make a claim here. It may be a bold one, but Bad Batch is to animated Star Wars what Andor is to live action Star Wars.
Okay, I like that.
So what you see here in Bad Batch is really great storytelling about what's going on in the background. Largely, you don't even think about the Force. You're not thinking about the Jedi that much. It's in the background. Now it comes to the fore a little bit more here in the 3rd season, but still, we're talking about these characters and what's going on in the background of the Empire that is so interesting. And when we are so accustomed to this Jedi Force-led narrative. It's been really cool to see what's behind the scenes and some of the characters that make the resistance that we've come to know and love actually possible.
Yeah.
So I loved it.
Yeah. I like that analogy, and I think there is so expansive. It's not just about a religious order, the Jedi Order, and what the Force and the dark side and the light side. You have an empire and a vast military, and then what I thought it did well is that it really leaned into like, how do we handle and take care of our vets? These clones were expendable. They were used as a tool and then thrown away and tossed aside. And then you kind of move into the stormtrooper era. That's always been a question in my mind. Okay, if the clones weren't stormtroopers, or are they or not, then when did that crossover happen from clones to troopers? And this kind of leans into that storyline and that story arc, with the Bad Batch kind of caught in the middle, looking and seeing what's happened to their brothers, and with Omega taking care of this kid who's a part of their family, and then seeing what the Empire is doing and growing its military industrial complex of taking over the universe and how they use its power. So they thought they were forces for good and keeping order in the universe, and then they see this dark turn. Literally dark turn in the Empire, and so now they're having to do it. So I think some of those themes and elements in there that now, of course, with the third season, all the speculation is Omega Force sensitive. Oh, what are they doing? They had to tie in like Palpatine and this Necromancer project and clones and M counts and all the speculation that I was hearing of Omega's going to turn into a Jedi and she has midichlorians and we're bringing up that word again, and they didn't quite go down that road, but I thought they at least hinted at it, because they got to figure out how to make Palpatine return later on in the Disney trilogy. So, whether that's shoehorned in or not, I'm not sure. But Christian, Kevin, you're just listening. And I'm glad you are. If you have a point of like something that comes up, or a question of what happens in this series or how it ties into Star Wars, pipe right in. But Christian, your thoughts on Bad Batch? You're a Star Wars fan. You're with me. You're a original trilogy guy. You're a little agnostic toward the Disney handling of the Star Wars franchise. So what did you think about Bad Batch?
Yeah, we're going to need a couple councils to decide its canonicity.
That may take hundreds of years to come up with a creed, and then we'll play with the language. And go ahead.
Yes. I'll take a slight dissenting opinion towards the show. Ultimately, I am positive on Bad Batch as a whole. Mm-hmm. But I think this last season kind of meandered a bit too much for my taste. I think it was rushed at the ending. I would have liked more exploration of all the clones. And Omega. I think Omega got the best characterization this season, and I was very happy to see her grow, and then her positive influence on Crosshair and Emery to the point that she is able to get them to be better than themselves. That's Star Wars. That's what it's supposed to be. It's about inspiring hope in other people, and Omega does that magnificently. But I will preface this with, I'm not a bloodthirsty person. I don't really enjoy having characters die that much, but I was expecting to lose more, and we didn't. Mm-hmm. And I was disappointed by that somewhat. It just felt safe.
Repent of the violence in your heart, Christian. Repent of that violence.
And don't get me wrong, I love these characters. I don't want to see them die, but it just felt like a safe, neatly wrapped up ending, which, by the way, I do love the ending for Omega specifically, of her joining the rebellion after they just retire for a bit, because that brings a lot of good stories that can happen from that.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think there were definitely, I think this is analogous to most Star Wars things. It starts off with like, oh my gosh, this is a great show, that it, like the beginning of things sets up this world. In the middle, kind of you're like, oh, what are we doing? Why is this taking so long? Why is this a filler episode? What is this adventure? And then it ends with like this climactic bang and battle and excitement, and then at the end of it you're like, I can't wait for more. So I know, like, even with the movies, I'm like, oh, it starts off great. In the middle I'm like, what are we doing? And at the end I'm like, that was the best thing I've ever seen, because of this final battle and conflict and resolution that happens there at the end. But I think you're right. Some of the episodes in the middle were kind of the adventure of the week. I wanted to move it a little along for a bigger universe of the clones, and maybe a clone stormtrooper war and to say who is going to and have the stormtroopers. Now we know why, but the clones aren't around as much because these stormtroopers wiped them out. But I think they're saving that for a little bit later on. And then how I'll share a little bit. I see Justin can't wait to say something, so I'm going to let him chime in. But my thoughts on Omega at the end. I have some thoughts and heart feels about that. But Justin, what sparked some ideas with Christian's comments?
Well, let me just first say I do enjoy how Bad Batch ties up so many loose threads within the Star Wars universe. At least they tried to, and I appreciated that. I also just wanted to point out that what's fun to see with Omega and with these other Bad Batch clones is how there are other Boba Fett's out there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, in that they are different. They're different than the other clones. They're not quite like Boba Fett was to Jango Fett, but Omega seems to be the closest approximation to a proper sister that Boba Fett has. So I love that differentiation between this Bad Batch and Omega from those other clones. This is another way of adding some character to this part of the Star Wars universe, and given our journey with Boba Fett more recently.
Yeah.
My gosh, I would love for to have Omega kind of redeem this with a show or a journey of her own. I think that would be phenomenal.
Yeah, I think, they started off as these kind of military special ops group out there for a mission. Then they became their own team, almost like the X-Men, with their different powers and abilities, and work together as a team. I love team books. I love Avengers. I love X-Men. I love Justice League. I like how their different power sets can complement each other and have the tension among them and who the bigger threat that's out there. And then Omega comes along and teaches them how to be a family. So you move some military troopers, not feeling anything, just doing your job, to have a feeling of becoming a family and understanding what love is all about in this universe where they're kind of caught in the middle of Empire and Rebels. And the end with her becoming such a beloved character, aging her up there at the end. And then she's like, I'm ready to go and be a part of the rebellion. And she says, I'm ready. And then you have Hunter kind of go, but I'm not. As somebody who has sent daughters off to college, and they're like, I'm ready. And I was like, well, I'm not. I got all the feels, man. I was all tearing up in my coffee early that Wednesday morning, dude. I was like, man, this is hard. And even they come home from college, and now they're going off to work at camp. And I'm like, I love it that they're working at camp. They're going to have such a good summer. But I'm like, I got to see about you again. I'm not ready. Go. I know you're ready to do this. So it hit me in all those feels. But then if you could use her later on down the road in another kind of rebellion side story, or perhaps, man, if we ever get that Patty Jenkins Rogue Squadron movie, maybe she is one of the fighter pilots in that movie or show. Come on, make it happen, Disney. Maybe that's what they're setting up. She's going to be an X-Wing because he was taught how to be a pilot and taught from some of the best. So her being an expert pilot somewhere out there in the rebellion, if they set that story in the in between universe before we get to A New Hope or shortly after A New Hope, I don't know. But yeah, she could live out there across. That's what I'm kind of hoping for. But yeah, I thought it started off great. The stories along the way were fun, but I wanted a little bit more movement towards this grander meta narrative of clone troopers and stormtroopers and Palpatine, and even I wanted Vader. I wanted that stuff to happen. But for it being its own story, and then having their own battle there, and this movement from Project Necromancer to Project Stardust, you kind of see where it moves from this clone. We're going to try to extract metachlorians from these Force-sensitive kids and child slavery to the birth of the Death Star is what they're leaning towards. So I didn't quite see that coming, and I liked it. And I like kind of that's where they lay. Christian, what are your thoughts on from Necromancer the Stardust. And this Empire having a lot of control of a lot of things. It seems like they have a lot of budget problems. I don't know. Maybe they need a better accountant. What is going on?
That's the failings of bureaucracy.
Yeah.
There's only so much money in the budget.
Right.
But no, I appreciate it immensely because it's Palpatine's fault it happens, because he's the one who decided to research the Zillo Beast forever ago in Clone Wars. And because of the Zillo Beast rampaging and the Bad Batch doing what they're doing, you can lay the blame at his feet for why he had to focus on the Death Star instead of Project Necromancer for a very long time.
Right.
And I love the poetic justice there of him screwing himself over, of him shooting himself in the foot.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. Justin, where's some of your thoughts on that? You have kiddos. You got a family there. Like, here's Omega, watching her grow and mature and teach her parents lessons along the way.
Well, there's a couple things. One, just piggyback on what I said before. I do think, using comparisons, I do think that though they are siblings in a way, Omega is to Boba Fett what Luke was to Anakin / Darth Vader. Like, this is kind of a redeeming of a story arc in Omega. I'm not sure that Omega was force sensitive at all.
Right.
This is really unclear to me. So what I think could be the case, my theory at least, is that what Omega represents is the ability to transfer in a kind of a cloning way attributes of one to another. I think that's the cloning gift. So the part of the challenge with the necromancer thing is what genetic container will be able to hold midichlorians.
Right.
I think that's what Omega and maybe even these other kids, I mean, some of them are force sensitive or seemingly force sensitive, but I think perhaps it's the case that what Omega's gift is that ability to be a container, genetic container that can house these energies. I'm not sure that she has them herself.
Right, and that's kind of what Palpatine was after anyway. And eventually when we get to Rey and get to that storyline where you agree with it or not, eventually he finds that years down the road of the perfect container and host of his dark soul essence in Rey, but then that's kind of rejected and she becomes a Skywalker, and we can have a conversation about that later down the road. But I think the kind of playing around with that and filling in the blanks along with that Star Wars story of family, love, connection. What are you fighting for? What are you standing for? Who are you standing up for? Taking care of your brothers with stun guns or lasers. They can whip back and forth. I can nitpick all the time about how often they used stun guns versus lasers and blowing things up or taking care of it. Inconsistent there, but all in all, I thought the series was good. I'm glad it was 3 seasons. I wish the middle of it in the 3rd season they did a little bit more plot-driven stuff. But yeah, where it landed, where it ended, I'm super excited about. And then I'm excited to see where she shows up later on down the road, whether that's 5 years from now, 2 years from now, in the next movie, Mandalorian and Grogu, she shows up as one of the helpers. Who knows? I don't know where they're going to put her, but man, I'm looking forward to seeing her. I do like her as a character, so cool. Any final thoughts on that, folks? Or Kevin, any questions we left up before we move on to the next one? The next one that we chose, all 4 of us said is our favorite out of these 4.
Yeah. No, I appreciate your thoughts. It's one I'm definitely going to get to. It's another case of there's so much stuff out there and it's hard to keep up. But I will say, okay, so how would you, if you have any quick thoughts on how the series as a whole compares to particularly the last arc of Clone Wars? Because that I think is one of the best things, not just Disney's done, but in all of Star Wars, that entire the Mandalorian saga, those last 4 episodes. So do you have any thoughts there as far as comparison?
I think animation style, man, they're just knocking out of the park with this animation and what they're doing on the screen. Almost as good as anything live action you would see. I think it tracks right up there with it. I think when you have 20 episodes or 15 episodes, you have a good start. You know what you're going to do, how you're going to land the plane is how you get there. And sometimes I admit, even my sermons that 15 minutes long. That sixth and seventh and eighth minute, people are like, where is Will going with this? And then I land the plane, baby. So yeah, I think it's hard in the middle of any kind of story you're telling of how to keep it engaging and gripping along the way. So I don't fault them for that. I think, yeah, the middle, you're like, okay, why do we waste time on that? Well, you're just trying to tell a story. You're trying to build some character development. So all in all, I think it tracks right alongside with it. Justin,
Nice.
Christian.
Yeah.
Okay.
I agree
Nice.
100%.
Yeah. Here's just a special treat for the YouTube viewers. A poorly photoshopped Spider-Man with Bad Batch.
That's your dream? It's the crossover you want? Is that it?
No, I just added Spider-Man to every single one of these topics in some way, shape, or form. So I Googled Spider-Man Bad Batch, and this is what came up.
Well, you're lucky because the next thing we're talking about, there's a cameo, a couple of cameos of this.
Hi, my name is TJ. I'm here to tell you about the Systematic Geekology shop. That's where we post all of our merch. It is hosted on Creator Spring, and we have a ton of really cool merch, mostly clothing. We have hats, extra soft t-shirts, sweaters, hoodies, and more. Our hosts wear them all the time. It's actually super comfy. We have glassware, mugs, which everybody loves a good mug. Fill out your cupboard. Get rid of some old ones, which is the part that I never do. That's why I have too many cups. We have cloth bags, posters, and it's really stuff. We like to put our icons on there. We like to put quotes, things we've come up with. And it's cool. It's a cool way. And a lot of it is pretty subtle too, to show support for one of your favorite shows. And my personal favorite is actually our SG dad cap, which I haven't been reluctant to buy it because now I have to wear hats at work and then I get tired of wearing hats. But it's really cool. It's really understated. It is our logo right here. And then it says Systematic Geekology on the back. It's great. It's a really good hat. We have a few of them floating around. Check it out. And if we could all just rock the SG dad cap in public, I think that'd be pretty sweet.
I don't have a sound effect for this, but I can go. Yeah, that's the theme song of X-Men 97. Oh, guys, we all loved this one. What do you think? It came right out of the gate. Kevin, we're going to start with you, buddy. First impressions. How did X-Men 97 do for you? They packed so much into this. I mean, every episode, I was like, what is going on? How many characters? What is going on? The drama, the soap opera. And then, man, how they ended this thing saying to be continued. There's going to be another season, so it's not the end of X-Men 97. Kevin, your thoughts?
So I grew up on the 90s series. Obviously, was a big part of like that whole era of, that and Spider-Man, Batman, the animated series, all that. So I had that part of the nostalgia there, and I was very much looking forward to this. But I think one of the biggest takeaways with this series is obviously the nostalgia is a big factor, but I would say this really pushed the story forward and made something very fresh and new. Because this is the guy, because like, growing up on the series, I always had nostalgia for the animation style and, of course, the theme song and everything. But I found that it's harder to entice people like older adults who didn't grow up on the series to watch it now, versus like something like Batman the Animated Series still holds up great. I will say like the 90s X-Men series, as fun as it is, it doesn't hold up as well today. Like you can tell like lags. I mean, animation has just evolved so much, and the storytelling is still fun, but I agree that it's harder to entice like new viewers to get into that didn't grow up on it. Whereas X-Men 97, I think, takes the best parts of it, but massively improves the animation. The drama is amped up. It's not entirely nostalgia. It's also, seeing, okay, how do we make an X-Men series that's relevant today? And I think they do that extremely well. And it's, while the 90s series still deals with heavier topics at times, it's still very much a kid's series. This is a series like I don't know that I would watch with like younger kids, or because especially episode 5 is very brutal, and it really. I was just reading an interview earlier with Brad Winderbaum, one of the executive producers and like the heads of Marvel Animation, and I mean he said they had very open talks about how this series would relate to current events, and I mean that episode. It evokes feelings of, multiple tragedies in the last era of the 21st century, like from 9/11 to The creator said the Pulse Club shooting was a big impact. And then, of course, it comes out right in the middle of everything going on in Israel and Gaza. And so I think the themes are so poignant, and it's more relevant to adults than it is to kids. So I think that's where it just really, ups. I mean, X-Men has always been allegorical in terms of mutants being representative of minorities and, discrimination, and how this group responds to that. But I think it does it even better here than it ever did in the 90s series. And, again, the nostalgia is there. And I love seeing characters like Nightcrawler making his, debut in this universe was phenomenal. And it fits so perfectly with all the classic characters. But that was really my biggest takeaway, is like, it's a perfect fusion of nostalgia and also very poignant adult oriented themes and material that coincided well with the animation style, and just really interesting seeing these characters progress. I think Cyclops also got probably like the biggest development, because he's often mocked as like the goody two shoes Boy Scout, and here they were really showing him as like, oh, he may actually have more in line with Magneto, or he's tipping that toe of like, does he want to keep fighting for the same standards he's always fought for, or is he being more enticed to kind of go against humanity and coexistence? So I thought it did an excellent job exploring all of those themes, and it was at times the plotting got like a little, like, so much was like kind of like going on at once. It got a little hard to follow, but it made for really interesting material as well.
Yeah, if you're a fan of the Chris Claremont X-Men stories, he would have like 4 plot lines going on at the same time while teasing another one. So that was the same kind of thing that was going on here. I think you're right, Kev. I think it lured us in with nostalgia, but then with his animation and his storytelling kept us there. And it wasn't just nostalgia bait. It wasn't just like pulling on the heartthreads of what we used to love and that kind of thing. But it moved the story forward and made it modern and brought in some new characters. And I loved every second of it. Even a friend of mine who, it hasn't been all that hot on kind of comics as of late, or the MCU of late, and kind of felt like it become stale and not really connecting with him. He was texting me every Wednesday morning like, have you watched it yet? Have you watched it yet? Oh my gosh, I can't believe they're doing it. If they do the X-Men like this in the MCU, I'm there. So I think it really built up and foreshadowed what could happen later on on the big screen. But for now, what's going on in these cartoons and the drama and the soap opera and all that goes on with this book was fantastic, which is why all 4 of us were like, yep, this is our favorite. And then you have that tension between Professor X and Magneto, of the responses to oppression, responses to being an outcast in the world, and how do you deal with that? Justin, you picked this over Doctor Who. Can't believe it. What was about this that drew you in?
Well, they had me at Cyclops jumping out of a plane and landing just with his visor beam. I mean, that you had me there. Yeah. X-Men has long been my favorite comic. Mm-hmm. And so my X-Men fandom might have even preceded my Doctor Who fandom. They're pretty close, but it may have preceded it. As Kevin noted, I've always enjoyed this idea of Professor X and Magneto kind of being like Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X, and this sense that really, though in popular media they're depicted as these opposing sides, but actually they worked together. They had disagreements, but they worked together and they had a kind of a friendship. And I like the way that X-Men works with this. I mean, here's an example. I thought this was so powerful here. So we typically think that Magneto wears a helmet because he's trying to block Professor X from taking over. But really, Magneto never thinks that Professor X will cross that line because of their friendship. He never thinks that Charles will take control and make Magneto act against his will. So the helmet is not for that. The helmet, I almost get a little emotional about it. The helmet is there so that Magneto won't feel the presence of his friend and therefore complicate his plans or what he wants to do. I mean, that mess right there, if it was that alone, X-Men 97, top of my list. So good.
Yeah, I love that. And we're coming off of like this in the liturgical season that Justin and I lean into, and in our communities we lead. We're coming off the 50 days of Easter and leading into Pentecost. And so part of that story then is when your rabbi, when your leader, when your Messiah ascends and goes back to the Father, what happens next with the disciples? Are they left alone? Who's going to be the leader? How are they going to posture themselves in the world like their Messiah, their Lord, into the world? What gift do they have? And they're given gifts to go be these people. So there at the beginning, Professor X is removed. He's not a part of this. So they have to figure out among themselves in this upper room, who's going to be the leader? Who's going to be the one to guide? How are they going to use their gifts for the world? How are they going to posture themselves as mutant outcasts and still do good? And then Magneto comes in and he's like, look, I can help. And he earns their trust in this by sacrificing himself in front of it. And then they try to create the society. I mean, I think those kinds of spiritual religious themes are there underneath in just like a comic book superhero story, because it still mirrors what's going on in our real world and what we're wrestling with when it comes to othering other people, to war, to nations, how the government gets involved or not. All those themes are there, all wrapped up in this, how every single person in this soap opera of relationships and love and jealousy and how they use their powers. Not it's just peak X-Men that I love. Christian, how about you? You connect with this, not just because there's a Spider-Man cameo, but there's other reasons you like this show.
Like I said earlier, like I used to watch this as a kid with my dad. We'd watch X-Men the animated series, Spider-Man the animated series, Iron Man, Fantastic Four, Batman, Superman, all those series together. And it was just like, man, I wish they'd release these on Saturdays, because it really would have hyped it up a bit more for me. But you know what? I'm not the one in charge of making their decisions. They can do whatever they want, because it brought me back to something that I really loved. And like Kevin said, like not everything in there is great from the old series. There's a lot of nostalgia in my head that's like, yes, I can look past those flaws because of what it meant to me. This built on those things that came before and did it a lot better. We adapt some pretty great stories here. If anything, my biggest gripe is that we don't spend time in some of these stories they're trying to adapt. Like Inferno alone could be its own season. And yet we get like an entire episode and that's about it. I mean, Storm regaining her powers and dealing with the adversary with Forge could have been dealt with a lot more. But you know what? They only had 10 episodes. These are the stories they wanted to tell. I'll show a little grace in that regard. But
you wear Bad Batch were like, why did you move slow in this part? Where X-Men were like, why did you go lightning speed through it? Spend more time. There's a happy balance. Look at us, fans.
Like, let me breathe in this world a little bit longer, please. But there's such great adaptations of these older works that are part of the X-Men stories. We get Fatal Attractions, and Wolverine losing his adamantium because of fighting Magneto, trying to kill him. Professor X coming back, denying himself what could be a good thing by being the leader of the Shi'ar Empire alongside Lilandra because his family is under threat. This season is so amazing, and like the parallels that Justin was bringing up between Magneto and Professor X, they've always been there, thanks to Claremont improving upon the mustache twirling Stan Lee Magneto and Roy Thomas, who are okay villains over there, but Claremont definitely made them a lot better. And like I what's that line, like I'll never let you go or something like that, when the two of them are like in Magneto's head, it's like, you're my friend, we're in this together, like no matter these waters can sweep me away, but I'm still going to be here with you. That means so much. Like, and Cyclops as well, like, as Kevin said, in the public consciousness, mostly because of the movies, kind of sees him as this dull, boring character because they liked Wolverine more than him. So it was nice to see him get his characterization back on point. It was nice to see Jean not faint every 5 seconds from using her powers, which is pretty much what she did in the old show. And of course, I'll agree, Nightcrawler as well. From that one episode in the original series where you see it focus on his Catholicism, on what his beliefs are, and now they did not change that characterization, which you could easily see Hollywood trying to do in this day and age. They make him a Christian. They make him the voice of reason. They make him someone who you like, man, I need someone like Kurt Wagner in my life.
Dude,
this show, I could keep going on.
He did. Was it Psalm 23? Which there's a verse we should know. I should have written it down. But yeah, at the funeral, he's literally quoting scripture. Yeah. So good. I agree there. I think you're right. I think this is somewhat of an experiment. They were like, all right, we got 10 episodes. Let's put in as much as we can. We don't know if we're going to get a season 2. We don't know how people are going to react to this. It became such a hit, the highest rated thing that Disney had done or something in animation. And they're like, okay, cool. We now have a season 2. So maybe they could have breathed in those worlds a little bit, those story arcs a little bit. They threw everything at it just to kind of pedal to the metal. I think we'll see in the next season, they left a teaser of kind of like, Days of Future Past, and we saw that wall of mutants who were crossed out, and those were, Colossus was on that board. I'm like, all right, I love Colossus so much. I saw his face; he's not crossed out; he's out there in the world. Pretty good. So Justin, you brought the attention of MLK and Malcolm X. I think a good theologian who bridged the two of those together is James Cone. If you haven't read any James Cone, please do. The Cross and the Lynching Tree, an amazing book, top favorite book of some of my top 5 of all books. But then, he kind of bridged the gap between you had to choose between one or the other. He's like, why not both? Let's think about what both had to say. But in this series, and their shirts around, and it's been around a while since the comics, there's this phrase, Magneto was right. And I've always had trouble with that because I'm like, man, I'm on Professor X team. I want to be a part of that school. I want to be a part of like integrating harmony between mutants and humans. How do you sit with that phrase? Magneto was because even lifted up in this series, even when I went, playing around. Then you have like the villain of transhumanism of machine and humanity and Bastion and technology. I mean, we don't have time to go down that right now, but that big baddie was good. But was Magneto right? Right or wrong? Answer, yes or no?
Oh, just a yes or no?
Just kidding.
So what does Magneto say as he's, got these UN folks there? Please do not make me let you down.
Ooh.
I mean, Magneto, I think, holds a clear and I think an accurate picture of the fallenness of humanity. Magneto's right in that regard.
Yeah.
I think he holds a clear, he is not being optimistic.
Mm-hmm.
He's got a clear-minded picture of our depravity and how it wins the day on most days for maybe even most people. Magneto sees this clearly. Professor X's vision has always been the hard path that would require great sacrifice to achieve. And so I want to say they're both right in their own way. I mean, you can start teasing me about my theology in other ways, but I do think that they both name a clear picture of the state of things and how things work if we allow the normal systems of power to operate.
So maybe
work.
Magneto wasn't wrong. Instead of another way of saying it, not Magneto was right, but he wasn't wrong in how he understood the humanity's response to the oppressed.
Yes.
And that they would wipe them out. So Magneto was right. We let them have this. We try to live in harmony. He was right because they wiped him out. Not right in his approach that now Homo superior is going to take over the world and wipe out humans, put them in camps, and kind of flip the power onto them. But he was right in a sense of humanity's response to the other and what we do to others when we do that. And so Professor X has this kind of idealism of the world and wants to present a better picture of how that works. But Magneto's the realist and like, look, dude, you can dream your dreams all you want, but we get out there. This Genosha is what's going to happen to us, and he was right.
Right. So the question is, who in the real world, even knowing what we know today, for those of us who follow and adhere to this Christian story, who looks at the strategy and way of the cross and goes, that'll do it.
Yep.
That's the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, who does?
Cross, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that's the Xavier way. It is the difficult path that will require great sacrifice to create great good.
Kind of like another phrase: with great power comes great responsibility. Christian, what were your feelings when I mean, I think they're teasing they're going to do a Spider-Man 97 next, and and you're just going to flip out. We aren't even contain Christian. We're going to let him just run with YouTube and take over for months on end, like his take on that. But yeah, the cameos, we saw a host of characters from the MCU and the comics show up. Christian, when Peter Parker popped up, what did you do? What was your?
That's an example of spoilers heightening the experience, because that's always been my philosophy.
Yeah.
So I knew beforehand it was going to happen, and yet when it did happen, when Magneto's using his EMP across the entire world, we see Silver Samurai looking at the effects, and then what's that? It sounds like a whip of webbing as Spider-Man looks up and sees everything happening. I lost it.
Yeah.
Knowing it was going to happen, I lost it. I loved every moment. And then later on, he shows up with Mary Jane, confirming that he saved her in the end after that terrible cliffhanger we were left with as the final episode. I was bawling. Like, please give me more. If you don't, I will raid Marvel myself just so I can get what I want. That would be my final terrorist action on this earth. I'll have to look at it from heaven more than likely, but I'll say it's worth it in the end.
Yeah, there you go. We have some comments by Evan on the YouTube page. He was excited about that too. Yeah,
but also my favorite one besides him was Cloak and Dagger with Daredevil.
Yes.
I never expected to see them. Those, I was blown away when I saw them in animation. I love those characters, all three of them. Mm-hmm. Oh man, it makes me want to show for them too. I want everything.
Well, they, again, conspiracy theorists, geek theorists, they're setting up other characters going to show on other shows and things that set up. But Cloak and Dagger, that's pretty cool. They had that. Did they have Kevin? Did they have a CW show? Did Cloak and Dagger have a show out there?
They did. Yeah. They did. Yeah. Like on Hulu, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was on Freeform.
Yeah.
That's some of that stuff before the streaming took over.
Also, Christian, I have another Easter egg here. It has to do with the casting, but Captain America obviously has a couple cameos too. Do you know who voiced him? I looked at the credits after it last night.
Who?
Josh Keaton, who voiced Spider-Man in Spectacular Spider-Man, which is a really interesting. So like that was it was all that, and then also Ross Marquand voiced Professor X, who he's been doing he continued the role of Red Skull after Hugo Weaving couldn't reprise it for Infinity War and Endgame. So that's how nerdy I am, is I look at the voice credits at the end and see like any Easter eggs there.
Well, this is a giant-sized issue, and that of what's new, and it's because there's the Easter egg. There's Giant Size X-Men #1. Go check out and read in Giant Size. All right, before we move on to the next one, we could talk about this forever. We probably will when news pops up. Things. Let us know in the comments or DM us. Let us know what themes and things you are excited about when it comes to these shows. We got to go around the horn before we hop into the next one. All right, I made you choose out of these four. You got to choose one X-Men that you identify with or would want to be, or your favorite. Which one would it be, Kevin? Which X-Men you're choosing?
All right, well, I've got it on my name here, but I'm a big Hank McCoy Beast fan, so I always he's always been my favorite as just like a perfect balance between brains and muscle. He he values intelligence, and I think would be a great leader, especially when Cyclops has his hot-headed days. I think like Beast would be a great senator there, but he's always empathetic and intelligent, but also fights when he has to and knows when to discern violence from anti-violence and when to defend his view. So he's always
solid choice
between the two. Like you do have these mutants that like poor Cyclops is a leader, but he can't walk around without his glasses. And you have Beast, who looks like a dumb monster, yet he's the smartest in the room.
Yeah,
Nightcrawler literally looks like a demon, but the most religious and faithful out of all of them.
Yeah,
pretty fun. So Christian, pick one X-Men. What are you going to pick?
I brought him up earlier, but Nightcrawler. Like they characterized him so well in this series, and I was kind of afraid, knowing how Hollywood typically handles their Christian characters. Yeah. But they made him the voice of reason, like I said earlier. They made him a respectful person without being like a preachy sort of person. Like, hey, like I'm going to talk about scripture. I'm going to talk about the Bible. We're going to talk about grief. I'm going to talk about family with you, Rogue, this found family that we have together. Yeah. And also, I'm going to go back to the Claremont area where he's just wielding 3 swords at once, way before Zoro would do it in one piece. Yeah. It's amazing. I love Nightcrawler in this series, and I want to be more like him as Christian.
There you go. Who are you picking? Who's your X-Man?
Since I was a kid, Professor X was always my favorite. When anyone asked, not just in Marvel, but who's my favorite comic book superhero, it's always been Professor Xavier, because of that ability to have restraint, because of the ability to see and call out the gifts of others, and then bring all these folks who don't make sense together to actually form a found family.
Wow.
He's been my favorite since I was a kid.
Yeah, it sounds kind of what pastors do. They bring a bunch of misfits together that you wouldn't think would normally hang out with each other for an hour in one room, and yet you pull them together pastorally. I'm with you. And you would think I would pick Professor X, like Justin, because of our haircuts. That's who I could probably cosplay the easiest is Professor X. But I grew up loving Colossus and Kitty Pryde, Shadowcat. I love their dynamic, their relationship. I love those characters in the comics. That's why the cameo for Colossus was great. And then seeing that him on that wall at the end of maybe being a part of the team next season. But I'm going to lean into Nightcrawler too. I love that. He looks like a demon, but he's the most religious. He's jovial. He's happy. He could be so depressed and cynical because of how people treat him, yet he wants to bring levity to the room and be pastoral and loving. He can wield a sword, and he's from Germany. I don't know if he's Catholic. He should be Lutheran. He's from Germany. He should love his German beer. But yeah, he's Catholic, and to go from there. So that's who we're choosing. Man, what a good show! Can't wait for. I think the reviews have been off the charts. People love it, and we want to see more, and they'll probably give us more, and then we'll see how they handle Wolverine and Deadpool and Wolverine, and who they bring into that movie to see how they launch into MCU. We shall see how Deadpool handles that. That will not also be not for kids, Kevin, at all.
Oh yeah,
see that. All right, let's move to our next topic. I have to hop off, but I'm gonna let you guys run.
I gotta hop off as well, but I will definitely watch the rest of this one. I'm looking forward to your thoughts on this. Yeah, sweet.
I just want to chime in just a second about Invincible and Doctor Who before I have to hop out. Justin and Christian, let you guys run with this. Invincible, I loved. I really see him as kind of like the rated R Peter Parker. This Mark Grayson is this character that Robert Kirkman created in the comics first to kind of be like a hero, a little bit more bloody, a little bit more edgier storyline. But in terms of like the learning curve of how to be a superhero and what it means to be a hero in the world while still having relationships and go to college and love your mom and love your girlfriend and yet pulled away to be the other things, is just classic superhero storytelling. If you can get past the gore and the blood, some people love it. Sometimes I'm like, wow, that's why over the top. But I think it was a fantastic series. I love season 2. Can't wait to see what they do next. And then I'll also say with Doctor Who, Justin, man, I love this new Doctor. I love the Christmas episode. Space Babies was incredible. And I haven't watched the other 2 that dropped, but man, I was telling Christian off air that if you created a drinking game of how many times he said space babies, you would not be able to last through the whole episode. You would have passed out before it was over. The time, because we all like saying it, space babies. Just keep saying it, especially in a British accent.
Space babies.
Space babies. Man, I love this Who. It brought back I watched a lot of Who as a kid, the Tom Baker run, but then because of accessibility of the new seasons, I never really got into the new Who. But now this on Disney Plus, I kind of dive in. And Pluto TV has a whole channel devoted to classic Doctor Who, and I've been trying to watch it. It's hard. I've been trying to watch it. But when you go to bed at night or just kind of fall asleep where I don't have to think much, but just kind of marvel at what they did with classic Who. But this series has been going on for so long. I love Doctor Who. I'm glad I was a part of the fandom and all those things. And guys, I'm gonna let you run and talk about the depth of these. Go a little, do some geekology and go beneath the surface and share what you learned in here.
Sure thing. Thanks, Will.
All right.
Yeah, Justin. Okay.
Ooh.
Invincible. Lay it on me. Your feelings.
Well, I don't know. You do. So this is of all of these 4 shows, this is my weak point. I am catching up on Invincible. So you take it away.
All right. So what have you seen? What haven't you seen?
I've just seen the first couple episodes of the second season.
Okay. All right. Yeah. This one continues from last one. Like, hey, you've got the reveal of Nolan Omni-Man being a bad agent working for the Viltrumites, and Mark trying to handle the responsibility of being a hero while also having lost his dad and dealing with the many superhero shenanigans that happen along the way. Him leaving Earth behind and finding he's been tricked. His dad is now the ruler of this alien planet, ruled with bugs who can mate with a very humanoid species, but don't worry about it. Just don't think about it. It's a thing. But it comes to that moment of, will Mark forgive his dad? Will he attempt reconciliation like Omni-Man's trying to do? And there's that he clenches his hand into a fist and you think, oh, a fight's about to start. But no, he runs to his dad and hugs him. And it's not like, hey, everything you did, it's okay. It's like, no, we have to have a serious talk. Yeah, in another series, that would have been handled very poorly. But the beginnings of reconciliation are starting. And I love that. And you saw up to that part, right?
Yeah, just up to that part. And I which I think is amazing too. I mean, this what did Will say? This like the R-rated Spider-Man.
Pretty much.
So, yeah, I do like that. So I am very curious to see where this arc of reconciliation moves.
Yes,
and I've not. I mean, you feel free to spoil anything, but I've not seen any spoilers. Not because I've been trying to run away from them, but so feel free to spoil away. I'm happy to know how it resolves.
Well, it comes to that point where, was it I think it was last season, or maybe I always get the seasons mixed up. Do you remember Angstrom Levy as a character, the guy who was from multiple universes, combined them all together into one person?
I don't think that happened in the first.
Okay, there must be second.
Yeah, I think it's second.
Yeah, I wouldn't trust my memory if I were you. Either way, it comes to that point where he's kind of created his own supervillain without realizing it. And that by merging with all the other alternate Angstrom Levies out there, there's a ton of universes out there where Invincible joins his dad, sets up concentration camps on the Earth, or is just a straight up villain. There's one where he's implied to be a cannibal and murders Angstrom Levy's son in front of him. And this seems to be like one of the few universes where Invincible is a good person. And it's heavily implied that it's the influence of Debbie, his mom, that prevented him from going down this path. I think it's specifically that one scene where she talks down to him, like when he uses his super strength against her, and he says, "Does this make you feel strong?" or something to that effect. Doing this to your mom, and him kind of having that realization of that's not what strength is. That's not what I should be. That led our Invincible to be the good guy we know, and as a result of this, Angstrom Levy is kind of messed up in the head because he has all these conflicting, contradictory stories of lives that he led in other realities that he doesn't know how to handle. So because the vast majority of them are Mark as this evil villain, he thinks our Invincible is a villain as well. So he goes up, kidnaps Debbie and Oliver, who is the son of Omni-Man and the alien bug woman, Don't ask about the genetics. It just happens. And holds him hostage, says, I'm going to mess with you, has gained the ability to just like transport Invincible across the universes, has increased his own strength. And we get a couple of really nice cameos. He ends up in a Walking Dead universe for a little bit. Since they don't have the rights, there was a story around the time that Kirkman was writing Invincible, where he was also writing Marvel Team Up with Spider-Man, where he had a crossover between Spider-Man and Invincible. But since they don't have the rights, they created Agent Spider instead for the show, who fights Prof Ock instead of Dr. Octopus for like a couple of seconds. We see like Batman's cloak for a little bit. It's like Mark making fun of his name, a very fun part of just interacting with the multiverses there, way before it became like more of a cliche in modern media. And it gets to the point where Angstrom has just messed with Debbie so much. He's broken her arm. He's threatening to hurt Oliver. And Invincible just pushes him through one of the portals with him and just stops holding back. And we get the iconic line, I thought you were stronger, when he realizes that Angstrom wasn't as strong as he thought he was. And it's quite the bloody mess, shall we say.
Wow. This whole thing with Invincible, and really the whole thing with Mark is, the question of what would happen to Superman if Superman didn't have Jonathan and Martha Kent.
Yes.
So we see that going on here in this show, like it's done in others as well. In these, when you have a Superman like character,
gone evil,
and so you see, well, even in other iterations of Superman, Ultraman, these kinds of folks. So how is humanity? The question is always, how is humanity infused into this character, infused into the situation? And how is it that humanity, this core understanding of humanity, saves the day?
Yeah, it's utterly fascinating how this plays out, because I am sick and tired of the evil Superman trope. Like, it happens way too often for its own good, which I understand why, because you have Superman as the big blue Boy Scout as a character. He's the paragon of what is good. So what happens if he wasn't? Like, right. That's a natural question to make. But when every 5 years or every 5 months, it seems, someone comes with, well, what if Superman went evil? I stop caring. Right. But this does that well, especially with Omni-Man himself, because he is what if Superman did go evil? What if Superman showed up, Clark Kent, Kal-El, lived on Earth for a couple of years, raised a family, but he was the vanguard for an evil empire? How does that happen? What do you do? And then we reach the end of the season where Alan the Alien has basically become a Saiyan from Dragon Ball at this point in time. It grows stronger every time he gets beaten up, pretends to get beaten up by another Viltrumite so he can find a Nolan in prison. And Nolan kind of has this realization, I miss my wife. You don't see Homelander doing that. You don't see the Superman from Injustice doing that. But you see Omni-Man doing that. And that's what makes me intrigued. So I know a little bit of where things go. I haven't read the comics, but I know some spoilers along the way. But I'm really looking forward to what they have elsewhere.
Well, you make me excited. I've got to catch up here on this show. It sounds like it's moving in a fun direction.
And we just talked on the Mark stuff. Like, there's plenty of other superheroes. Adam Eve is growing as a character. Rexplode grows as a character. Like, there's a very brutal scene where the Guardians of the Globe, the weaker members, are fighting like the Lizard League or something like that. They're basically the Serpent Society, but lizards. And they're considered a complete and utter joke, but people start dying. Heroes start dying and end up in situations where a character probably should have died. But it's very well done. And it's like, hey, just because you label someone a joke doesn't mean that you can just ignore them. There's so much here. We're not going to focus on everything. Especially, I'm going to leave something for you when you get to your watch.
All right, sounds good.
So, anything else you want to talk about Invincible before we head over to New Who?
Oh no, let's get into New Who. I'm ready.
Oh, let's do this. Okay, Justin, we have had Christmas specials. We had 14 by regenerating into 15 at a later point in his history. Lay it on me. What do you think of these first 3 episodes we have?
I think these were really fun episodes. What we're seeing here is a sort of a rebirth of Who, just like in X-Men 97, we are hoping for this rebirth of the Marvel universe. This is kind of like, when all of creation was essentially destroyed in the Matt Smith era, and this just a particle of creation could be recreated, because of the TARDIS, and through a particle, all of creation could be recreated. Here we see this lovely recreation of Doctor Who. One of the things that has always been on my mind in these last seasons of Doctor Who is how long could the Doctor remain tortured, and how long before that would just weigh down the show. Now we've removed that. The Doctor even says, I think in the second of the 3 episodes, that he was fractured, but the part of him that is that this Doctor represents seems to be free of that constant brooding and torture because of what has been. And so in that way, it is able to return to some of, as Will mentioned, the fun of the Tom Baker days, where you've just got this brilliant person having fun as he moves throughout time and space with his companions. It's freeing in a way.
It's nice to be excited about all this.
Yes.
You're doing exciting things.
Yes. I mean, so the sense of wonder, the sense of companionship, which again is now, from the very beginning with the Doctor and Rose, there's always been this. So, you guys gonna connect with enough time and space here? And whether that happened with a companion or not, there was often this tension, or you had to talk about why it was not going to be that way with Martha, with Donna, just keep on with Bill.
Yes.
But here you see that fun of these 2 folks traveling in space and time, not asking questions about how to define their relationship romantically, but really enjoying the thrill of it all, even in the midst of the seriousness.
Yeah.
So, and you've got this great balance between things that are just fun and whimsical. Space babies, really? I've been watching these. I've been watching these with my 10-year-old son, who was thrilled to have a black male presenting Doctor, and so that's been really fun for him. And so we're watching, and so he looks at me and says, "Space babies? We just laughed. It was so much fun." But then being able to move between that and a more serious episode where you've got just a handful of characters on a battlefield with a nemesis that's really unclear, yet trying to figure out ways to move forward, and the stories about family that were in that episode and connection, and how the gifts of a parent or a family are even felt beyond death. This has been some good Doctor Who in just 3 episodes.
I heartily agree. I was at first, when I saw the overly affectionate nature of both 15 and Ruby, I was like, I don't know about this. Are they going to go that romantic route again? Are we going to have to deal with this again? But it just feels like, no, it's not that. It's It's like two friends who you didn't know you need to know you had in your lives, just hanging out and being like, "Hey, this is cool. This is exciting. Like we're on another planet. We, that's the Earth right there. Let's hug and just like have fun together. Let's just goof around, dance off, have a musical number. Like it, it's nice to have fun again after not having fun with 13, as which once again I will say it every single time. It is not the actor's fault. She was handed terrible scripts. I would have loved to have seen her, Jodie, do better scripts, but that is what it is. We are now in the present. We don't have to worry about that right now. Like Chudy, is that the correct way to pronounce his name? Yeah,
in Shooty, I think is the way.
In Shooty.
Yeah.
In Shooty. Okay. I will probably say it wrong every single time. Like, he brings a vibrancy that I really haven't seen in the Doctor since parts of Matt Smith and mostly from Tenet, of like, hey, yeah, we're angsting every now and then, but we're also here to have fun. We're also here, like, looking through a companion's eyes. The Doctor's seen the Earth from space a million times before, but to see Ruby's face, it lights him up and like brings that joy back into his life to a man who suffered a lot. Yes. I mean, how many times have the Time Lords been genocided? More than 0, which is the number you kind of want to have. And yeah, do you want to go episode by episode? How much longer do you have? I don't want to keep you here forever.
Oh man, I've got time to walk through Doctor Who. I can certainly do it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, let's go with the first one, Space Babies. So we start with them just randomly going to a year. And there's this fun little moment, too, where they almost end up in the future where the Daleks are in control of the Earth.
Yes.
But she adds a 5th number, and he's like, oh, thank God. Because, yeah, that would have been a terrible first story for Ruby to have to deal with the Daleks right off the bat. And they end up on a space station, with this weird creature that's hunting them down. Doctor's like, why am I running away? Yeah, he runs from stuff, but like there's something primal in there. It's like messing with them. Meeting the Space Babies with their goodness gracious, that they've been abandoned by the people left behind. And I rolled my eyes so hard at the line of, oh, we don't care about them when they're alive or whatever it was. And that's its own thing. I know Russell T. Davies. I know his politics. And I know me, we're never going to agree with one another. It's fine. It's what it is. If that was a sticking point, I wouldn't have gotten past like the first couple of episodes of 9, Yeah. So it is what it is. I'll just throw my own opinions in aside there. So what do you think of this episode? What comes to mind?
Yeah. So a very fun episode. It was, and though we did have some of those little political hooks in there, it is interesting to think about ethics here. So there is, the ethics of leaving these babies, the ethics around the preservation of life generally. So you have this boogeyman, which is fun and silly and gross. But the Doctor cares about all life.
Yes.
If you're the last, there is a responsibility that they feel about preserving life. And so I love to see that core of the Doctor's ethics shine through. This was an episode that there's got to be a certain number of these kinds of episodes, I think, in Doctor Who that are just fun and silly. They've got a moral principle or a core to them. But for the most part, it is for you to just look at whoever you're with and laugh and say, I love this Doctor. I love this companion and the way that they are interacting here. This was just pure Doctor Who candy for me.
And I agree. Like, we can have that discussion. I don't want to shy away from real things that happen in the world. And media is a perfect way to do that. And obviously there's going to be people on one side or the other. So to have this episode, it needs to be said. We had the recent IVF issue debate.
Right.
You've got the repealing of abortion in America, Roe v. Wade. Well, not totally of abortion, but as a national system and more on a states level kind of thing. And yet this brings up, hey, these children, the people who are watching over them, we see the videos of them leaving in protest. And this is for a company that could probably fire them for doing that. Say, hey, I'm leaving under duress. I'm leaving not because I want to, but because you're doing this for the wrong reasons. And yet one of them stays behind.
Yes.
And pretends to be this robotic mother AI for them using
nanny.
that filter, nanny. And yet you see the genuine humanity in her. It's like she gave up her life and her goals. And who knows if she has a family out there somewhere for these kids that everyone else abandoned, knowing they're probably going to die up there. No one's going to come and rescue them. And yet she held out hope. And the hope came in the form of this flamboyant, fun doctor and his very fun companion. The two of them, like, they instantly see these babies just in these strollers, and they just pick them up and hold them. I'm like, I want to hold them too. Like, let's look after these space babies. Like, I would die for you.
Yes.
And yet, part of the story.
Have you ever been held? The doctor asks the captain of the babies. And goodness,
broke my heart.
Your heart.
Yes. And yet we get that whole thing of like, hey, the part of the development of these children, and part of one of the themes of this overall season is stories, and the fantastical elements within, like, they need a boogeyman as a sort of like growth. Like every child grows up with that one thing they're afraid of, the local legend, or just in general something like a boogeyman. Be like, what? He's under your bed or he's in your closet. But for them, it's a very real threat that isn't actually out there to kill them. It's just there to instruct them. And I love that they did that because it's a very whimsical way of bringing something like that to life. It being made of boogers and the whole thing with, the diapers leading to a methane release at the end. I kind of just rolled my eyes and moved on with my life. But that is what it is. But I kind of appreciate what he's doing in that there's been fantasy elements in Doctor Who before. But this seems to be going more science fantasy than science fiction in this season. And I'm very curious to see where that goes.
Yes. Oh, that's really good. That's really good. And because this is one of the ways that they're clearly choosing to tell new stories. And I love that this got set up with a superstition at the edge of the universe. I mean, we're still dealing with David Tennant's Doctor, the 14th Doctor, doing this, in that it has opened up a whole new science, a whole new way. And so I like that movement between science fiction to science fantasy. I like that. That's really a great way of putting it. Speaking of superstitions at the edge of the universe, shall we talk about the next episode?
Of course. So after toy maker, goodness gracious, why am I forgetting names? Neil Patrick Harris. After him being dealt with, it was revealed he had several children's kind of like embodiments of certain concepts. And we start with a discussion between a piano teacher and a young student, Harry Arbinger, which that reveal was fantastic. That's such a great name for a potential future villain, Harbinger. Oh my gosh. And then them being the grandchild of the maestro, who you hear maestro and you think, oh, master, it's got to be the master. No, it is the embodiment of music, of song. And when the maestro comes out and talks with the professor teacher, you start to see history change as a result of being unleashed using the devil's cord, which I've heard conflicting reports about whether or not that's actually a thing. So that the church banned at one point in time. I think the idea behind it was that it just sounded too menacing.
Yes.
So it said, oh, that's obviously Satan's cord. You can't use that. But whether that's true or not, citation needed.
Yeah.
And it creates a world where music doesn't exist as we appreciate it today. Instead, it's just these schlocky songs about a dog that the Beatles are singing about. I have a dog. And There's no Hey Jude. There's no Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds or anything like that. It's devoid of meaning. Justin, what do you think?
Ooh. So, one, Devil's Chord, yes. I mean, this is a thing, and emerging from the time when the church really was in charge of music in the West. I mean, or at least the church was responsible for the greatest patronage for music in the West, and because of the ominous tone. So I thought that was fun. A little bit of a fun introduction of music history into Doctor Who. I love this idea of the harbinger, who was the twist at the end, I think, of that episode, right?
Yes.
In that the harbinger of things to come. You know, something emerges and the harbinger goes away, but then the harbinger is back again and something else will be to come. And so we have this whole setup of these beings that may be, and also that the maestro knows something of the one that Ruby comes from is really interesting. So it's going to be fun to see, because we just don't know what kind of being Ruby really is here. It's this question. The sound that the TARDIS makes when they come back to 1963, kind of a groaning sound. I wonder if the TARDIS is not necessarily dealing with the loss of music, but still trying to figure out who Ruby is, because that's a process that the Doctor has running, the scan of who Ruby is. Well, yeah, this episode was really fun in that you begin to see what happens if music is weaponized. Not only the loss of music and how that is destructive to the world, how it begins to unravel things, how it changes history, because love and sorrow and hopes and dreams are all tied up with this music. And so all you have, if you take it away, is a nuclear wasteland. And this idea of the weaponizing of music, in that the more this maestro consumes of music, the more music it's able to consume. And so the very harmonics of the galaxy and the universe are threatened by this growing power. I mean, have you ever thought of music being so menacing, or the lack thereof being so menacing?
No. Wow. This episode made me think a lot about music in that regard. It's like, I have never been talented at like creating music or singing. I'm the one you want in the back of the crowd that, is never the worship leader. Like, there's a joyful song, noise to the Lord, but it's not going to be a joyful noise to the people around me, But I appreciate music. I love music. I listen to music as I write because it helps me to focus with my undiagnosed whatever that goes on in my head. And if that were not there, if I were not able to do that, I couldn't write. I couldn't produce anything. And I owe so much to it. And this made me realize how much I owe music. It's like, hey, I'm in the car. What do I want? I want music playing. Or I want a podcast playing or something like that. But music more specifically sometimes helps quiet my soul, helps me focus on matters, helps me get through the day at times. And for that to be stripped away and all the creativity that would be lost because of it, well, no wonder we ended up having a nuclear winter way before we were supposed to. Because how are we supposed to express ourselves in any other way? Like, everyone at some point in time is like broken out into song, not necessarily in a musical sense, but like just to express what you're feeling.
Yes.
And that's such a dagger to lose that from your life. And I love also the callback too of them going to the future, seeing a terrible present, just like the Doctor did. I think it was Tom Baker fourth with Sarah Jane for the Pyramids of Mars. Sutek takes over the Earth, you're going to see exactly what happens. It's going to be a terrible wasteland. It's like, that's such a nod. Like, you don't need to know that episode for that to make the point, but it really enhances your appreciation of earlier stuff to know stuff like that. And the Maestro is just such an effective villain, a very menacing villain, played extremely well. It could be completely and utterly goofy.
Yes.
And there could have been like a presumed menace, but the battle between the Maestro and Doctor over music, and the fact that the Maestro's ultimate goal is to get rid of all music forever, just so the Maestro can listen to the Aeolian tones of the wind, which was a term I learned by watching this episode, is haunting. Because there's no more life left. It's just the wind making music, and the Maestro is going to be the only person who can appreciate that in that future.
Oh my gosh! I'm telling you, this was really a brilliant villain to introduce. Now, the one thing I was a little disappointed about was, and I think even my 10-year-old talked about this, was, so if you're going to have the Beatles be featured in the episode, you kind of want a little bit more of them. Now, granted, you know, we got help to save the day. We got help to save the day here.
Yes.
And maybe there's some musical rights and things like that we need to have here. But I thought, oh my gosh, it would have been fun to have just a little bit more of Beatles there. But I thought that the conversation there in the cafeteria about music, where you see that creativity start to bubble up again. I mean, wanting to be released, such great musical creativity coming from these folk, wanting to be released, but then in a moment being taken away, and how the response was just a harsh shutdown as soon as that was taken away. I thought there's some fun scenes in there, but I thought maybe we could do just a little bit more with it. And then, you know, the dance scene, musical number at the end. So this is going to happen, I think, a few times. I mean, we saw it in the Christmas special, but honestly, I was humming that song for days. So it was fun.
Yeah. To go with your Beatles point, this was about as clever as they could get, knowing how expensive it is to license Beatles songs. I remember, like, there was one season of Mad Men where they used a song, and it was like a fourth of their budget for that season for the rights to play that song, or it was some outrageous number, because they know they can make money off of it. So it's a little bit of greed. So that's why you don't see Beatles songs played too much in films or TV shows or what have you. So this was a clever way for the Beatles to show up and yet not have their music played, because even with, you know, the money Disney's throwing their way, you know, there are limitations. This would have been like a 3-episode season if that had been the case. So I get it, as frustrating as it is, because you want to hear the Beatles play, and you kind of do near the end. Only 2 of them, but you know what? I'll take what I can get. And I've never been like the biggest Beatles fan, but like I still appreciate what they've done in their mark on music history.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. Anything else for this one?
Oh no, I think we could move to the next one here.
All right, it's time for the boom. Yeah. All right, Ruby's first alien world. She's been in space away from Earth with the space babies, but she hasn't actually been on an alien planet before. And we get Moffat back for this one.
Yes.
As things go more serious. You know, we had a fun little musical number. You know, there's always a twist at the end. That's fun. Yeah, there's a little menacing there, setting things up for the future, but mostly a positive ending. And then the Doctor steps on a landmine in an active war zone.
You know,
Justin, your thoughts?
There are these episodes where, and they fill Doctor Who and just about every show, where it almost feels like a standalone. There are connections that will be made, but it almost feels like a standalone. So you step on this war-torn planet. You know, the Doctor does this thing, which at some point the Doctor's really got to stop doing. Like, there's a voice that someone needs help, and then you call back into the TARDIS, hey, stay put. They never stay put.
You think he'd learn by now?
You think he'd learn by now. And so the doctor's off, and the doctor spends the episode essentially on a landmine, so you're going to see the doctor really need to use their mental capacity here. We're not sonicking our way out of this. We're not fiddling with anything. It's really just thinking through it and then helping those around think through it.
Yes.
And I love those kinds of Doctor Who episodes. And so in this one, I thought it was a bit darker. It was a bit more serious, dealing with death and loss from the very beginning, but also the power of memory. And I don't know, Christian, it might have just been me, but here over these last 3 weeks, I have presided at 3 memorial services or gravesides, and I have been thinking about memory and what it means for memory to be a blessing. More in that Jewish community way, may their memory be a blessing. And so as I watched this episode and these little containers or testaments of a person, I watched memory be a blessing in whatever is going on with Ruby. I watched memory be a blessing. This whole snow thing. Yes. This was also the episode where, and I'm thinking through Doctor Who here, this might have been one of the strongest, or maybe even the strongest episode that questioned a very plastic, simplistic, blind, unconsidered faith. Right? Yeah. Yeah. And as a person of faith, I thought, "Ooh, okay here. All right, Doctor." Doctor was angry in his or their. I don't know what to call the doctor now. His or their challenge to this kind of simple faith. Yeah. What are your thoughts?
No, yeah, that's a great point, because we've seen the Anglican Marines before, and I think it was A Good Man Goes to War, working again for the wrong side. And it's kind of this idea, is that what religion turns into far in the future? Are there the paramilitary organizations devoted to keeping the faith around? Do we have this point where capitalism is, were there acceptable losses to have on the battlefield, to the point where we engineer wars, utilizing faith because you have faith in your creed, in your religion, to say, well, I'm doing it for the right reasons. I'm fighting for the right cause. And the doctor does rightly call that out. And I don't see this as an anti-faith at all, because he does need to have faith in the end. And I'm sure that Moffat, he has his own issues, obviously, with faith in certain areas, but it's not an indictment against faith as a whole. It's, what do you have faith in, and what does that faith produce, I think, is what he's asking. Yeah. And, these Anglican Marines, they've lost their way. The fact that there is a paramilitary force in the name of Jesus Christ, we may have a couple issues with that in certain regards. I don't know about you,
yes.
but still, it's like faith in family, faith in others is brought up here, and that girl was definitely seemed to be written for a younger character. I don't know why they had such an older actress for her, because she was acting like she was like 6 or 7. I think she's like 12 or 13. But that's its own thing. But like, hey, what child doesn't have faith in their father or their mother or whatever parental figure that they have? Because who else are you supposed to rely on in this world? And even after death, the father's faith as this AI, who is not the dad, but the AI taking on his qualities, is what I understood it to be, becomes more than it was ever intended to be, because of love for his daughter and for the people around them. Knowing that if the doctor explodes, not everyone's going to make it. It makes that sacrifice play to take over the AI of this twisted development of acceptable losses. We'll give you the remains and you can pay this much for everything in a very evil capitalistic kind of sense. And it's also that faith in, for the other characters, I can't remember names off the top of my head, of believing strangers. For the female Marine who believes in a doctor in Ruby, and open battlefield when she has every right not to, and yet after confirming things for herself, gathering evidence, her faith is increased. And I think that's a good point to be made too for this episode.
Mm. So I like that. I like gathering evidence. Her faith is increased. This episode does seem to be one that seeks to laud or commend a thinking faith. Again, no plastic, simple, but a thinking faith that reasons, that grows. The doctor often seems to have this kind of openness to more information, growth, and expansion of our understanding, and this sense of pacifism, which will put the doctor at odds with any kind of faith that doesn't look like the peaceable kingdom, as we might want to talk about it in Christian theology. So I agree with you. Not an episode that is anti-faith, but one that commends a robust faith.
Yes. And I completely agree with that. I think many churches would do well for their members to actually spend time on their own learning, because that's mostly the times in my life when I've grown the most have ironically been in periods of doubt. And that's because it forced me to go, do I believe in what this book from over 2,000 years ago has been written by multiple different authors from multiple different periods in time? Do I actually believe this is truth? Why is that truth compared to Greek mythology, compared to Hinduism, compared to atheism or agnosticism? Like, what makes the Bible real? Well, I had to do the work on that. I didn't just, there's something you said. Yeah, we are supposed to have a blind faith to an extent. There are things that we're never going to see. I have never witnessed Jesus raising someone from the dead. I never witnessed Jesus coming back from the dead. So I have to take it on faith that happens, not because I'm an idiot who just believes what people tell me, but because I look at the evidence and I see that, hey, for this story to have happened, it seems like actual history. It seems like there have been people from all over the place who have looked at it. There are doctors, lawyers, police officers, FBI investigators who have looked into the actual resurrection and gone, and people who don't believe in Jesus as like their savior and said, I'm having a hard time disbelieving this. But I can say that firmly because I did the work. Other people, and not everyone needs to have a PhD in apologetics or anything like that. But, at least try, at least do something beyond just trusting whatever your pastor says, whatever your priest says.
Right. Now, I do love this, and I think I'm trying to remember to name a specific instance of it, but this seems to be the doctor's general posture toward faith, because faith does come up here and there across Doctor Who, and I think what you get each time is this kind of expansive. Look, I'm not saying faith is something that you shouldn't have, but it should be an expansive faith that sometimes even often moves us to greater mystery, greater territory, greater understanding of who God is and who we are, and our response, and because of all of that, our responsibility to others around us. It is in this expansive view.
Yeah. Yeah, I was very grateful for this episode. And my initial reaction was, I don't know, until I thought about it more and said, okay, no, he's not talking about people, just faith in general is bad. He's talking about that. Yeah, if just because someone says it, then you believe. Like that's not real faith. That's I grew up in church. That's my dad is this philosopher and that's what he thinks. Or I grew up in this environment, therefore that's what's real. Like never questioning things. That's what he's fighting against, and I can definitely get behind that. Do you have anything else you want to add for this episode?
Oh, nothing other than just to restate that I am very curious about this Ruby Sunday mystery. This is another mystery to solve, not exactly like the Impossible Girl, thinking about Clara Oswald, who was wrapped in mystery in Clara's early episodes. But in a different way, this is a very mysterious person, and to determine what role Ruby's going to play in all of this, gosh, this is a fun unfolding. Little hints here and there.
I'm very intrigued by her. It's like, did she exist as a concept before the Doctor defeated the Toymaker? Is she one of the ones involved here? These higher beings? Maybe, maybe not. Or is she just some regular girl who some people even have posited she might be the Doctor and Rose's child from that other reality.
Yeah.
And that's who dropped her off, knowing the Doctor would pick her up one day or what have you.
Well, it's also, so in the most previous episode, we just talked about Maestro trying to take away the music for all of the universe and feeling as if the Maestro could, but when the Maestro is faced by the music in Ruby's heart, it's so powerful that the Maestro can't quite figure out how music can be this powerful. Like what? So if you think you can in a vampiric way digest the music from across the galaxy, but you don't think you can digest this, what's going on?
Yeah,
with Ruby.
And then too, beyond her, we have this mystery woman who keeps showing up in these episodes. I don't know if you've looked into it.
Yes,
Susan Twist is the actress's actual name. And she shows up as like the tea lady. She's one of the people resigning in Space Babies. She's the face of these automated devices. Like who is she? Is she?
Yes.
Because we've had multiple mentions of the Doctor's granddaughter, Susan Foreman. Could it be her? There's also one thing I saw someone note that they saw the name Susan Triad appear in a poster in like one of RTD's room, in one of his, I think his workroom in a documentary, and Susan T would be an anagram for the TARDIS. So people will speculate. You give them like this seed, and they will make that thing germinate in ways it's never supposed to. But I'm kind of curious, who is this woman? I'm kind of in the camp. I kind of wanted to be Romana because I really miss Romana. I love her a lot. But I'd be fine with her being Susan too. I think her original actress is still alive, so we could even have flashback scenes with her and how she regenerated, if this is the case. Yeah, I'm all for this new season, man. If you can't tell, guys, we're loving Doctor Who right now.
Oh boy, this is so good. I've caught on to the Susan and to this mysterious figure, and I'd been wondering if Ruby might have been the Susan's daughter.
Ooh.
And I thought, how cool would it have been if Susan was dropping Ruby off in the person that the doctor. One question is like, so something happened where the Doctor didn't engage or interrogate or seek to discover who this mother who was dropping this kiddo off was. And there are parts of the Doctor's memory that are either blocked or are kind of unfolding that we see, because in the moment where the doctor remembered her hand pointing at him, he hadn't remembered that before. So there's a lot going on that night with the doctor around these characters. It'll be fun to see, but I am hoping to see Susan come back, and Romana would be really fun as well.
Oh, yes.
We shall see.
Oh, yeah. I think I said Susan T. I think I meant to say S Triad would be the Enneagram of TARDIS. So that's on me. So yeah, anything else you want to add before we start this? Stop this bad boy that we've gone on for quite some time.
No, that's it. This has been a lot of fun. These are 4 great shows to talk about.
Yeah, we've already talked what our favorites are, so we're not going to do that. Yeah, we didn't do a lightning round at the beginning. Do you want to do that real quick?
Sure, you start. You kick us off.
Yeah. It's not a new show or movie, but I just got from the theater yesterday for Studio Ghibli's 40th anniversary. They're doing special things through Fathom events at theaters, and I saw Nausicaa again, and I fell in love with that movie again. Fell in love with her as a character again. I don't know if you're a Ghibli guy or not, but that's my favorite Ghibli film of all time. And it was just nice to be reminded of that. And a smaller thing, we do have the trailer for Ultraman Arc, which will be coming out in July. So I'm looking forward to that. So anything for you, Justin?
Well, a couple things. One, I have been working through, because I have a complicated relationship with this show, you may recall, I've been working through Star Trek Discovery.
Yes.
And I'm really interested in how they are connecting with the next generation. And I'm sticking with it. I'm sticking with it.
Okay.
It is
okay.
It's proving to be engaging enough for me to not abandon. So, thank you, Star Trek Discovery, for that. The other thing I'll say is I watched the latest Ghostbusters movie with one of my kiddos this weekend, and I tell you, speaking of nostalgia, I love the way these last 2 Ghostbusters movies has really capitalized on that and has helped these movies to feel a bit like the original 2 Ghostbusters movies. So that's just a bit of fun that I have enjoyed.
All right. That's a final treat for the audience.
Yes.
This is what happens when you Google Spider-Man and Doctor Who. So if you're on YouTube, you get to see that image. If not, I'm not going to describe it to you. Force you to come this way. Yeah, that's it. So guys, thank you for listening. I know this episode was a lot longer than what we normally do, but how could we not just talk at length about the things we were discussing today? Thank you, Justin, for being here with me till the end. Thank you, Kevin and Will. Thank you, Will, for handing this episode over to me when you had to leave. I had so much fun doing this. We could easily go longer, but we do have lives outside of this project. So we'll go to those again. Thank you again for listening. Please get a chance to leave a 5-star review in your podcasting platform of choice. Just help us with the ratings there. You guys are the best. But remember, we're all the chosen people, a geekdom of priests.
Make sure you follow us on Instagram, catch us live at events we are holding or attending, get updates when we post new episodes of the podcast, see our other favorite content that we lift up and support, as well as just see our beautiful faces and engage with us through messages. Maybe watch a reel and give us the feedback of what you think of the show. If you love our show, you can follow the whole network in a single feed on Spotify at Anazao Ministry Podcast or the network page on Apple Podcasts. There you'll find shows like The Homely, The Whole Church Podcast, My Seminary Life, Let Nothing Move You, Dummy for Theology, The Bible After Hours, as well as mine and my husband's show, The Clydes, where my husband Taylor and I go through weekly discussions in a devotional conversational method to help us all get closer to one another and God.